Hello and welcome to growingupanchorage.com. My name is Naomi Sweetman and I'll be talking about the website today in this presentation. I am the daughter of Jana Ariane Nelson and the granddaughter of Donald and Denny Griffith. I was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska, and my grandparents came up to Alaska in 1948. And in my lifetime, Anchorage has changed a great deal. But it's changed even more since my grandparents came up and my mom grew up in Anchorage. This website is dedicated to the stories during that time frame.
Hi, I'm Jana Nelson. I started a website called growingupanchorage.com. My family moved to Anchorage in 1948 when my twin brother and I were 6. Daddy went to work for BLM and Mother eventually worked at West High as a teacher and counselor. Some of you might remember her. Her name was Denny Griffith. I stayed in Anchorage, raised my family there, and then moved to Oregon in the mid-'80s. A couple of years ago, my husband and I came back to Anchorage for the wedding of one of my granddaughters. After we flew home, I thought a lot about the changes I had seen in Anchorage since I'd lived there. For a long time, I'd wanted to write about my youth and Anchorage's youth. And I thought about the different culture that my grandchildren have grown up in. When we moved to Anchorage in 1948, Alaska was a territory. There were only about 15,000 people in the city. Few blocks of 4th Avenue were paved. The city basically ended at the park strip. We lived in Spenard in kind of a semi-shack that was being built. We had lantern light most of the time, an outhouse and a floor furnace in the middle of the living room floor. No running water for the first few years. The changes that came brought Mount Spur erupting, dumping lots of ash on Anchorage. Jack and I went out and played in it because we didn't know any better. The Cold War was going on. That was scary. Statehood happened. That was really exciting. And the earthquake came, and of course that was horrifying and terrifying and sad for a lot of people. And then the pipeline years were very interesting years in Anchorage. My grandchildren didn't experience any of this historical times that Anchorage and Alaska have in her fairly recent past. So my desire grew even stronger to somehow preserve these memories. I started out with a few of my memories combined with notes and letters, copies of letters that I have of Mom's. And eventually, Growing Up Anchorage was born.
As my mom indicated, almost overnight, what began as an individual mission suddenly blossomed into a formidable group undertaking. And today, just over 3 years since the first post, she has 165 stories and a total of 26 authors, including herself. It has grown from her high school friends to others who found out about the endeavor through the website or Facebook. And this is the magic of Growing Up Anchorage. It has moved from being just one individual's endeavor to a collective effort that many people are invested in. When you land on the home page, you see a link on the left to the Anchorage Centennial website. Growingupanchorage.com is an approved project under that program in Anchorage. There's a full biography of my mom and her life growing up in Anchorage, complete with pictures of her and my Uncle Jack. It updates followers on the latest interviews and republishing of the story. There have been quite a few instances where over the radio the story has either been read or authors have been interviewed, and stories have been republished in a number of different publications. And so those are highlighted on the website with links that take you to those different places. Growing Up Anchorage is far more than a blog. It's a group venture that's dedicated to preserving the authentic stories and life in Anchorage in those years. Jan Harper Haynes shares stories of her Koyukon Athabascan heritage. Gene Brown remembers his father's flying school at Merrifield in the late 1940s. Mike Gordon talks about Reuben Gaines, Chilcoots, and the birdhouse. Dan Riker shares his experience of falling through the ice at Big Lake over Easter weekend. Kathleen Wilson remembers Hewitt's Drugs, Monty's Department Store, and Dorn's Music Den. Mary Jo Cummins recalls getting stuck in the clay on Turnagain Arm. Many of the artists remember Glenn Norton and the original North Star Elementary School, and many share stories of the 1964 earthquake. These are not the stories of the luminous historical figures in Alaska's history. Rather, they're the memories of everyday people who lived under rather extraordinary conditions. And these are the stories of Anchorage that need to be told. In the author's page, each author has a picture, brief biography, and a link to a page where each of their stories are posted. The Last Frontier Cafe is a section that allows individuals to share memories and pictures without becoming a frequent contributor. Some of these stories, such as Mike Byers' story of his great-great-grandfather in Valdez, do not relate to Anchorage specifically, but they're very interesting nonetheless. In his words, my great-great-grandfather was Fred Vaughn, who owned a roadhouse and hotel in Valdez, Alaska, and he faked his own death to get away from a mean, ill-tempered wife. My mom talks about reflecting on her childhood memories of the glamorous frontier. But she often wondered how different my grandmother saw those years through the lens of her own experiences. Fortunately for my mom, she has my grandmother's journals that tell her some of what my grandmother was feeling. But beyond all the hardships of those early days, a great love was born for the last frontier that would last my grandmother for her lifetime, and my mother's lifetime as well. The Last Frontier Cafe is truly a page that reflects so many individuals' great love of Alaska. Info Nuggets give informational tidbits from Anchorage's rich history. Connie Osbon has compiled a brief history of Alaska in the 1940s. My mom added a copy of my grandfather's tax return for 1949, when Alaska was still a territory, and Anchorage's own star is celebrated. My mom keeps this section of the website updated on a regular basis and encourages contributions from her writers and others who would like to contribute to this section of the website. The Midnight Sun Masters is a page that highlights frequent contributors that are multi-talented, adept at many things. It provides many biographies as well as pictures, and often more than one picture. I encourage you to get to know the Midnight Sun Masters. As I indicated, they are multi-talented and adept at many things. The Sourdough Shop sports recipes for sourdough, and if you would like to contribute your famous sourdough recipe, feel free to contact my mother to do that. It does also provide a history of my family's sourdough starter written by me. And to this day, my mother, brother, my Uncle Jack, and I all use the starter that we got from my grandmother.
Hey, we all love Alaska, right? It's beautiful, extraordinary, gorgeous, awe-inspiring, and Anchorage is really unique. I invite you all to visit growingupanchorage.com. 25 other writers have joined me in this project, and I've posted over 165 of our stories on the web. They're funny, some are gritty, Some just tell it the way it was. Some are sad. Some just grab your heart. You'll love them. I've done a lot of research into my family history over the years, and it's given me a real resolve to preserve these stories from growing up Anchorage. What would I give if I could have personal written stories from my ancestors that came to this country in the 16 and 1700s? But they don't exist because nobody wrote them down. This spring, I'm going to publish an anthology of stories from growing up Anchorage from some of the authors, and I invite you to keep an eye out for it. Here's the book cover as it'll be. Hopefully, this will be the first of many anthologies, stories from growing up Anchorage, as I reach out and attract more writers who grew up in Anchorage and have wonderful memories of those years. Thank you.
As my mom indicated, she's now collected enough stories that she's begun to pull together an anthology, which will be published through Amazon sometime late this spring, early summer. This is an image of the cover and the back of the book. And as a genealogy researcher, amateur, what I wouldn't give to be able to know the stories of my ancestors. And what an incredible opportunity for future generations to have stories of their ancestors that will give them insight into what life was like for them during the 1940s and 1980s in Anchorage. And it helps provide a richer picture of how Anchorage came to be what it is today. How can you participate? If you like to write stories and have memoirs to share, become an author. Contact my mom. As well as publishing stories from accomplished authors, she provides encouragement and editing for those who have stories to tell but aren't as experienced. If you know someone who has stories to tell but they're uncomfortable writing, help them write their story. Everything posted is reviewed and edited, if necessary, for grammatical correctness and appropriate content. All stories should be authentic, true experiences within the 1940s to 1980s time frame. Last names are generally left out unless the person named is deceased, and all memoirs and photographs are protected by copyright. Share the website with your friends and family. Encourage weekly visits to growingupanchorage.com. My mom offers a subscription service so you can get regular newsletters telling you what's going on the website. She sends notification out each time a story is posted, and if something new happens, she'll send another notification out. And she's really good. You really only get one email a week. If you like this presentation and you would like me to give it live, contact my mom. I'd be happy to do so. Support growingupanchorage.com by donating to help offset website and publishing costs. There's a donate button on the left side of every page. With the exception of a few donations, all fees and website costs come directly out of my mom's pocket. This has become a half-time endeavor, and there's no outside funding to help with this. Purchase the anthology, Growing Up Anchorage, an anthology of enduring memories from vintage Anchorage when Amazon publishes it later this spring. GrowingUpAnchorage.com provides a unique setting for the encouragement of new writers to publish their work and visibly share it with friends and family. History remembers the politicians, the big events, statehood, the 1964 earthquake, and the pipeline. And even my Uncle Jack, who grew up in Anchorage and graduated from Anchorage High School, will be remembered for his work in microbiology. It rarely records the words of everyday men and women who lived in Anchorage at the time. Future genealogists will find this archive indispensable in understanding the culture of Anchorage during those years. My mom has made participation in growingupanchorage.com quite easy. If you're interested in becoming an author or want to participate or just simply subscribe to her newsletter, go to growingupanchorage.com. You can also contact her directly through her email at janaariane@msn.com.